This fall, I met with John Koopman, the George Washington actor and interpreter, rode his horse, and saw his 18th century reproduction tack collection, one of the best in the country. As a professional, I was very curious about his history and his career choice, so I sat down with him for an interview. Okay, so I'm here with John Koopman. We're asking a series of questions because this is a very intriguing man who portrays a very interesting and important character in our history. So John, just a couple questions. First one, because I personally want to know this, your history with horses. When did you start riding?
Well, I got involved in reenacting in 1998, and I was on foot, but the unit I was with had some horses, and I thought, wow, that looks really cool. I want to learn how to do that. So I knew nothing about horses, so I took lessons, and at this point I'm in my early 40s, and so then I gradually got to the point where I did the rent-a-horse thing, where you can rent a horse.
Awesome.
And then I got to the point where I decided that was too limiting, so I wanted to get my own horse. And so my first horse, his name is Apishai. He's retired. He's a quarter-horse appendix. And he's still around me. He's not riding anymore. He's got arthritis.
Is he that chestnut?
Yeah, we should introduce you before we go.
You ride a chestnut in the Mount Vernon movies that I've seen, his battlefield.
Oh, that's Skills.
Skills. I remember talking about Skills. Yeah.
He's living the good life on a 50-acre farm in Virginia right now. He's retired also.
Brilliant. Excellent. So your reenacting career then was going to be my next question. You started reenacting before riding then?
Yes, and then I was always been involved with the 2nd Regiment Light Dragoons. So they were, the focus of what I'm in now is called Talmadge's Troop. And so we focused on Benjamin Talmadge, who of course ran the Culper Spy Ring during the Revolution. So when I'm not General Washington, I'm often a private in the 2nd Dragoon Regiment.
Well, yeah, actually, I was going to bring up the first time we reenacted together was in Brandywine, I think 2 years ago.
Yes.
You were portraying.
Yeah, so we were as the 2nd Dragoons would have appeared in 1777. So we were, at that point we still decided we had our leather helmets. It wasn't until later we got the brass French Dragoon helmets from France. But yes, that's the first time we were at Brandywine.
That's when I met you and Bear for the first time.
That's right.
Yeah, we had talked prior to that because you were a big resource for me when I started researching. So the next question then is, when you started reenacting as Washington, did you find any primary sources, or what primary sources did you particularly discover that you found most interesting?
Well, of course, I began by reading books by, the one I found most helpful was Ron Chernow, Washington, a Life. So that's how I learned probably the most. I also read another book on George Washington's life by Joseph Ellis. And then, of course, I realized that very quickly, if I'm going to be George Washington, I better, learn how to get to the actual writings. So they have, the founders online, and then they have the Washington papers. So very often, sometimes it could be something as simple as what words were they used for this. So sometimes I'll look up a particular word and see, did they use that word at that point?
Wow.
But so I very often I'll reference, what I find very helpful is sometimes I'm hired to give a speech. So what I'll do is whenever I can, I'll try to get actual words from Washington, things that he actually wrote, and I'll use that in my prepared speech. For certain historic sites, they want me to give like a short speech. And the thing about him was he's such a master of words. He had a very, very manly way. If Jefferson would say the intellectual thing, Washington would have a very manly way of saying something.
Right.
So I like his word choices, and so I do often reference the Washington papers.
Oh, that's amazing! I never thought of that. But you're so right with his background, getting into military career kind of early, and with his somewhat humble background, I could see him being that way.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic. So,
Perseverance and spirit have done wonders in all ages. That's my favorite quote.
that's fantastic. Oh my gosh. How many? Well, that's a good question. When did you start playing Washington, and how many years have you been training?
So I started reenacting in 1998, and then around 2006, they were looking for a Washington for some very specific events. One in particular in Ridgefield, Connecticut, because we were, at that point we were going into the 225th part of the American Revolution. So as my dragoon commander, I never even thought about it. He said, "Well, why don't you pick Koopman? I mean, he's got a horse. You know, he looks like Washington."
Wow.
And then the whole thing, it just took me by surprise. It just so happened that a friend of mine by the name of Henry Cook was making the clothing for Mount Vernon, because he used to historic tailor that made all the clothing for that display. So this is actually the first coat. We got permission from Mount Vernon to make this coat first, because I needed it for that reenactment. And so it's the same historic tailor that made it, you know, for Mount Vernon. And then before I'd even done it, I had 3 invitations before even having done it once, because it's a small hobby, and word got around, you know, well, gee, Koopman's going to be doing Washington. Why don't we have him at our event? So, and then of course, to me, still the greatest moment ever was as I'm a member of the Brigade of the American Revolution, I was allowed to be Washington at the 225th anniversary ceremony of the surrender at Yorktown. We actually had it on Surrender Field.
Oh.
And had about 2,000 men at arms, and it was kind of a gloomy day. It was intermittent rain, but I kind of gave more emphasis to the somberness, I think, to the occasion. But to me, that was the most penetrating, absorbing, amazing experience, to actually be on horseback as Washington with the, you know, we had the French staff with us and my other aides de camp, and to watch, you know, the British, you know, turn in their arms. It was almost like, you know, I was there, kind of feeling.
Yeah.
But that was probably still the most amazing experience I've ever done as Washington.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. You walking in their footsteps, you know, their spirits come alive. That's fantastic. So when you did reenact in Brandywine, or when you reenact as the 2nd Light Dragoon, what saddle do you use for that?
So I chose to use my Elliott saddle, because I thought that normally when I'm a 2nd Dragoon and the age is not, the time is not important, I prefer using my French Dragoon saddle, because they would have been given that, you know, by the French. But since we weren't quite in the alliance, we were just quite yet, I decided it was more appropriate to use the Elliott, which is the British Dragoon saddle, which we as Americans would have made a copy of. So yes, I use the Elliott saddle for that one.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Perfect. Excellent. Last question then would be, did you find pride? I've found a few, actually a pretty decent handful of Washington as a horseman. Did you turn to or find any primary sources of Washington as the horseman that he was?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's not widely known, but there is a book by one of the historians of Mount Vernon. Her name escapes me at the moment.
Mary Thompson?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Yes, I went to her for research for my bachelor's.
So she wrote a report, you know, horsemanship at Mount Vernon. And so that had a lot of fascinating things. We learned in it that he was actually mounted on Nelson, the chestnut, at the surrender at Yorktown.
That's right.
So even though, you know, he had blue skin, the white horse, he still favored Nelson because he stood the cannon fire better. He was a more stalwart fellow. But I thought that was a really neat thing to know, that he was on Nelson at the surrender at Yorktown. And it so happened when I did it, I was able to be on a chestnut horse. So it kind of, you know, made a good connection with what actually happened.
Excellent.
But yeah, that was a good experience.
I found a lot of really interesting stories of Washington and how throughout his years he experienced more and more, you know, chaos in the saddle, but that he always got back on. Like, he wasn't thrown easy, and he preferred the fact that he wanted Nelson as opposed to, you know, his half Arabian blueskin.
Yeah.
Even though blueskin looks the part with a white horse on the top of general. I relate to that because I had a white Arabian, but he was skittish, like some Arabians are.
So I'd rather have my standard bred in battle as opposed to my Arabian.
Well, more
And-
solid.
Yeah, Mary Thompson, though, she's the one who has the biggest collection on horsemanship in Washington.
I know, I got a lot of interesting information from that report. I actually got it through Newburgh, because I'm very often, they select me to be Washington at Washington's headquarters in Newburgh, New York,
Wow.
and that's how I got that. They said, John, I think you'd be interested in this. So yes, I am very interested in that. But yes, what people don't realize today that in the 18th century it was very common to see people on horseback, obviously. But many people mentioned that when Washington walked by, even on a horse, people would stop and stare just because he was so elegant and so poised and so. They called him the American Centaur, half man, half horse. And even Jefferson, who was very sparing with his compliments, he said he was the finest horseman of the age. So he definitely he was an outstanding horseman.
That's fantastic. Yeah, his approach to horsemanship, from what I've read too, got really genteel as he aged. He never felt he had to manhandle his horses, as opposed to his horses just followed his lead.
Matter of fact, there's an account in that same report that I'm mentioning that he rode, I believe, with the Marquis de Chastellux, who they became excellent friends. They were about the same age, French general, and it was probably Nelson that he commented to Chestnut that what a fine horse he was, and I believe that Washington let him ride him, and he commented that he was very soft in the mouth. In other words, it took very little pressure to get him to do what he wanted to do. So therefore, you can train, to be soft in the mouth. So then, therefore, he also commented, Chastellux, that specifically that Washington trained his own horses.
Yeah.
So yes, he did have a very he had a gentle but but firm approach.
Yeah, which is what horses need.
Right.
Well, that's fantastic. Then I suppose the last question I'll give you is, I want to point out your hat. It's a tricorn made from beaver skin, but the rosette on it is very interesting. It's black, a rosette with white on top of it. Now the black rosette signified America, right?
Yeah, I believe the white was the French alliance. Now it's in the shape of an X. It's actually out of an original portrait. So there is an original portrait. So there was a man by the name of Matt Brenkel, who's an expert in 18th century hats, and he made this cockade for me. And there is an actual original portrait of Washington with this very cockade representing the French alliance.
Excellent. Well, that's all the questions I have for today. Thank you so much, John. Hopefully I get to do this again. And God, thank you for letting me ride your horse.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
And thank you for your time.
Yeah, bears seem to enjoy it.
He had fun. I know I did. Thank you so much. All right. Take care.
Take care.